Hello, welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I hope you're doing very well. I'm doing fabulous, thank you very much. And thank you for joining me tonight. I've got a fabulous story for you that you're just going to love. But before we get started, you know what you need to do, get that lovely drink. Because whether it's cold or hot where you are, something refreshing is in order. So before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah and all your lovely listeners, I drove down the familiar dirt road. The rubber wheels of my bright pink Jeep Wrangler had not graced this long driveway for over a year now. It seemed strange to be back here again in Iowa for the very first time in ages, returning to the old Richard family farmhouse where I had spent so many relaxing summer afternoons playing with my two best friends, Tammy Wilson and Sally Ann Richards, in our younger days. I had known those two girls since I was knee-high to a grasshopper when I was tottering around in nappies, as our parents had been lifelong friends, socialising and interacting together. After we left home to further our studies, we had always agreed that we would meet up here on the Richards family farm on the 15th of November every single year without fail. It seemed like a savvy way of keeping the connection between us alive. We all feared that we would lose touch one day, going our separate ways, making new friends, moving to other parts of the state, getting married, having babies, starting up a whole new life a world away from Iowa. It could so easily happen. The power of distraction is a natural threat. It lies in wait for you with the stealth and cunning of a tiger, pouncing on you unaware in the dark shadows, where she drags you under her forceful hold. Everything goes awry as the natural routines of daily life, the responsibilities, commitments, appointments all take hold, enough to sever the strongest of friendships. It was something we all feared and dreaded, as the idea of our friendship wilting away like a wild flower in an open field and dying was not something we were open to accepting. Granted, we did have the advantage of social media, but for us that bore little comparison from spending real physical quality time together. Growing up, we'd been as close as sisters, possibly closer. The one thing we all had in common is that we were all late lambs in our family. We were that unheralded present delivered to the front door so impetuously. My mother only discovered she was pregnant with me 6 months on, when she thought she was going through the perimenopause, while Sally Ann's father had a failed vasectomy. And as for Tammy Wilson, her mother went around town telling everybody that she was suffering dreadfully with the menopause. She talked about the menopause as if it was a contagious, infectious disease that you certainly didn't want to catch. It's a very real phenomenon, she told her alarmed friends, who were now living with a rising level of trepidation as they wondered who would be next to experience the hot flushes associated with the change of life. I've got it earlier than usual. Just my rotten luck. My hormones are flying all over the place like dandelion seeds. My mind is as wobbly as jello. I can't even remember a thing. My memory's like a sieve. I've become so clumsy, dropping things everywhere, all over the place. I feel nauseous and sick all the time, but luckily I can only say that I don't have those awful hot flushes they talk about. But the menopause belly, it's a dreadful condition. They never warn you about it. They never tell you how really bad it is on those television health programs, she said, her eyes growing really wide. I think they don't want to alarm women of just how bad it really is. And the weight, oh, that's impossible to shift. I've tried every exercise, every diet, but my belly is growing like a balloon every single day, getting bigger and bigger. It's so inflated, my husband says I look like a beach ball. I think it might be exasperated by an allergy to dairy, as that can really blow you up. It never occurred to her that she might just be pregnant. One day it happened on her kitchen floor of all things, when her waters suddenly broke. Out popped little Tammy. As her husband put it so eloquently, I left in the morning for work as a father of 3, to return home as a father of 4. It was quite remarkable. Very, very remarkable. I'm one happy man. Of course, all three fathers were rarely thrilled to be dads again. It seemed that Sally Ann's father believed he was startlingly virile. He had overcome, conquered, defeated a vasectomy. It was something he never failed to boast about to all and sundry, as if somehow he had accomplished an awe-inspiring feat, like climbing Mount Everest or swimming across the English Channel. He wore his illustrious acclaim like a badge of honour on his lapel. Going back as to why I was returning to the Richards family farm, well, it was the 15th of November again, the fixed date whereby we would meet up at least once a year. My mother had suggested this phenomenal idea to me. She seriously regretted losing touch with so many of her former hometown friends after university, whom she never heard from again. She really regretted that. So far, the plan had worked seamlessly, as for 3 straight years we'd never failed to meet up on this particular date. It wouldn't be a train smash if the date had to be altered, but luckily to date, that hadn't actually happened. I had grown up here in Iowa, the land of luxurious rolling plains that sprawled out for an eternity, along with miles upon miles of pretty prodigious cornfields. I was raised here on a corn farm myself, not too far away from the Richards family farm, close to Highway 63 or thereabouts. Time had flown by so fast, so speedily. Where had it got to, I thought, as my car rolled past the wide-open meadows where the green grass was beginning to become bespeckled by yellow patches. Then there were clusters and clusters of hardwood trees, from maple, northern pecan, chestnut and black walnut trees, the latter being the most abundant tree on the farm. They stood together like towering tall strangers, covered with vast bushy heads of now yellow-green hair that contrasted superbly with the black bark. It was an exquisitely stunning November day in autumn, which wasn't unpleasant for the beginning of winter, as there were some pretty prisms of sunlight dancing all over the valley. But it was significantly colder, as there was a real bite to the air. I could feel my heart fluttering with excitement at the thought of seeing Sally Ann and Tammy again. It was so thrilling. Yet I also felt nervous. I often worried that we would change, become different people, lose that close connection that had anchored us together as friends for so long, like boats moored together at the harbour. Finally I reached the custom-made farmhouse that had been on this land as long as I could remember, but it was considered quite modern in its day. It was made from dark brown painted timber, with large glass windows, along with fabulous entertainment areas with floor-to-ceiling glass sliding doors that led from the living area onto the wrap-around porch that snuggled the house ever so tightly. It overlooked resplendent panoramic views of the idyllic Iowa countryside. My car engine purred as I navigated up the drive towards the parking bay that was fringed by some youthful oak trees. I pulled up the handbrake, switching off the engine, my eyes drawn to the front door. I could see a hazy silhouette, then a figure. It was Sally Ann, standing directly outside the bright red front door of her home, her blue eyes meandering towards my car. I could see her face looked animated. She was excited to see me. I glanced at her. Oh, she looked so pretty. Her pixie face sported a modern shag, a rather contemporary hairstyle, enhanced with a few contrasting highlights in ash blondes and pale reds. It suddenly hit me how grown up she appeared. She looked like an elegant young woman now, not the naughty, wild, blonde-haired child I remembered playing with as a young girl. She ran towards me, her hair bobbing up and down, her blue eyes sparkling, flinging me into her arms in what I can only describe as the warmest, most compact hug. For a moment I thought she wasn't going to let me go. She was squeezing me so tightly I could barely breathe. "Tanya," she said, tears spilling down her cheeks, "it's been too long, far too long. I've missed you so much." "Don't get me started," I said, hugging her back, feeling the misty tears rising up in the back of my eyes. It felt so good to be together again, even if I was coming up for air like an oxygen-starved goldfish. Then it was Tammy's turn to arrive. She did not escape the exuberant tight clutches from Sally Ann either, who welcomed her like a rambunctious Jack Russell who hadn't seen his owner in years. I could see her pale skin looked flushed with delight. She was ever so pleased to have been welcomed so enthusiastically by Sally Ann. She looked gorgeous as well, in an emerald green long-sleeved dress, while her long dark hair swept back elegantly in what appeared to be a pretty knot. It felt like we'd never been parted. "We're having an autumn barbecue," said Sally Ann, bubbling over with enthusiasm. She guided us through the opulent-looking entrance hall, with its stunning pieces of contemporary artwork, taking pride of place on the wall, through to the very stylish living area, swathed in luxurious furnishings done in rich golds and reds, onto the porch, where her father was manning the meat that he was cooking on a rather swanky open grill. I could smell those delicious nostalgic campfire smells that wafted over the patio, sizzling proteins, lipids, aromatic herbs, fruity smells that titillated my taste buds, causing my stomach to rumble hungrily. "It's good to see you kids together again," he said, greeting us warmly as he flipped some burgers over on the grill. "It's been a long time, far too long. It makes me feel quite the old man, seeing how you've all grown up like this. Don't mind me. I'm cooking you lunch, leaving you to it, as Sally Ann has made it clear to me that parents aren't welcomed to your little tete-a-tete." "So you're not invited to our lunch, Mr. Richards, but you'll do nicely as the cook waiting on our every need," I teased. "Something like that," he chuckled. "Sally Ann has me well trained." "Oh, there you are," said Sally Ann's mother, rushing towards me, and to Tammy with open arms. Thankfully her hug was not as suffocating as her daughter's, but her welcome was intense. "So lovely to see the both of you. It feels like the good old days again, seeing you back here on the farm with us. My word, haven't you both grown into such beautiful young-looking women? It seems like only the other day you were running around in your nappies. It so grieves my heart that children grow up so fast these days." "You never know," I teased. "Maybe your husband's vasectomy will give again." "Not a chance," laughed Mrs. Richards. "That goose is well and truly cooked, I can assure you. I think we can safely say there will be no more late lambs." Before long, Sally Ann's parents had left us alone, and we were eating a delicious barbecue, with all the trimmings washed down with the finest French champagne. After we toasted each other, Sally was telling us that she had a party game planned for us. "In this hat I have some papers with questions in it. I ask you to tell the truth, that's all. Would you like to pick out a card?" she asked me. "All right," I said. "Here goes." I read it. "When did you first kiss a boy?" I flushed, the pink colour rising in my face. "Well, I was about 8 years old. I kissed Tommy Piper, do you remember him? Behind the Wendy house, in our backyard. He ran away from me, crying, never spoke to me again for years. Every time he came to our house, he would cling to his mother. He was terrified I'd kiss him again." "But you ended up dating him anyway when you were 18, said Sally Ann, looking surprised. "What made you kiss him?" "I don't know. I guess I always rather liked him. It wasn't even planned. I just did it. But it freaked him out." "Your turn," said Sally Ann, handing over the hat to Tammy, who took her time shuffling the papers around inside it. Finally she pulled out a little piece. It read, "Have you ever stolen anything? And if so, what? And why?" Tammy flushed. "I have, actually. One day when I was little, my brother asked me to look after his pet hamster. He was going away on a Boy Scout camp. I was so thrilled about being given the responsibility of looking after his little pet. It was a white hamster. I accidentally left the cage open. The cat killed it. I was absolutely mortified, too terrified to tell anyone what had happened. So when my mother went to the pet shop that day to buy some more pet food, I tagged along with her and went to play with the hamsters in the shop. When the owner wasn't looking, I stole a white hamster, stuffing the poor thing in my knickers." "You're kidding," I said. "You stuffed it in your knickers?" "I did. I'm not kidding. It seemed like the perfect hiding place where it wouldn't be seen. It was wiggling around frantically, but when I got home he was absolutely fine, thankfully. When my brother returned from his break a couple of weeks later, his white hamster actually gave birth to several little babies. He couldn't understand it because he had a boy hamster. How had it managed to morph into a girl? But I never told him a single thing." "Wow, that really is some story. Did you ever confess to him about what you'd done when you were older?" "No, not on your Nelly. He'd never forgive me if I did." "It's your turn now," I said to Sally Ann, handing her over the hat. She pulled out a piece of paper and read it. "A secret you have kept from everyone. A secret you haven't told. It must come out right now." Sally's face grew grave. She stammered for a moment, as if she wasn't sure whether to tell us or not, which was a real bummer, as we had been friends for years. What was she holding back, I wondered? We told each other everything. Well, I thought we had. "Come on, Sally, out with it," I said. "Fair's fair. We've told you our deepest, darkest secrets. Now it's your turn." "When I was 15 years old, I had an encounter with a Bigfoot." "What?" piped Tammy and I together in astonishment. "You never told us. We're your best friends. Why didn't you tell us?" "I'm not sure," said Sally. I just couldn't tell anybody." This was the story she told us. My parents had invited 2 couples over for lunch. I'm not sure who they were, as I'd never seen them before. I think they were connected with my father's work in some way. It wasn't uncommon for him to invite random guests over to lunch. I do remember my father saying that it was important to make a good impression on them. They were rather nice people, so I thought, friendly. I remember the one lady had a French accent, a very stylish, elegant woman she was, called Françoise. She was wearing an eclectic, long, stylish black dress with a big pendant on it. I remember thinking that she wouldn't look out of place at the Tate Art Gallery, talking to customers about great works of art done by some of the masters. She looked like, very artsy, but stylish, polished, classy at the same time. You could tell she was a passionate woman with a very engaging personality, the kind of person that would make an impact if she entered a room, like that. It worried the heck out of me that she was chatting up my father so obviously. I could sense and feel a powerful attraction brewing between the two of them, but while my father remained indifferent, she looked quite predatory. I think Dad was thrilled to finally meet someone who shared his enthusiastic passion for contemporary art. Mum had never understood or appreciated his interest in art, but this woman, she clearly did. It was like Mum was blindly oblivious to the way Françoise was eyeing my dad up, like a rather ravenous female praying mantis. Well, you know how my mother can be so gullible, so over-trusting, fleeceable and naive. Well, she positively encouraged my father to go and show Françoise all his artwork, some of it that's stored in the outside barn away from the house. That really got me concerned. I remember trying to put a halt to it. I told Mum that Dad's stuff is all wrapped up in bubble wrap in the barn, that it would be such a huge, monumental mission for him to unwrap all that work, just to show Françoise. My mother said, "Oh, don't be so silly, Sally Ann. If Françoise is interested in your father's artwork, I don't think he'd mind unwrapping all that bubble wrap to show her some of his precious pieces." I thought I was going to throw up. I remember Françoise fluttered her fake eyelashes. She said, "Well, if it's not too much trouble, I really would be rather fascinated." That was when alarm bells began ringing loudly in my head. I was terrified that Françoise was going to pounce on my unsuspecting father. "You didn't trust your father with this woman?" I asked. "More like I didn't trust Françoise with my father. I mean, she looked like the type that aggressively pursued her quarry, a woman that hunts for the men she wants to seduce. I could predict that she would try and wheedle her way around my dad the moment she had him all to herself. I could just envisage it all happening. What troubled me the most is that Françoise was not the kind of woman you could reject very easily. She had an ego on her that would make a male lion look rather small. So once my father had shown her the artwork in the house, he proceeded to take her outside towards the barn. So I trailed surreptitiously behind them, keeping myself well out of sight. Once they'd finished opening up the pieces of art, I could hear the oohing and ahhing, you know how they go over this and that. And then they came out of the barn, talking and laughing together, discussing some of the work. Françoise became blatantly flirtatious. They were about to return to the house to join the rest of the guests when I heard her say, "I really love black walnut trees, especially at this time of the year. Why don't you show me your woodgrove? I'm really interested." My heart began to sink as I sensed that Françoise wanted a great deal more from my father than just art and trees, much more than the woodgrove itself. She wanted to frolic in the hay. That was what was on the cards for her. I just knew it. I felt it and sensed it in every part of my being. Francoise was saying, "I see that you and your wife don't share the same passion for art. It seems such a pity that you have so little in common with her." "Well, we may not have a lot in common when it comes to art, but we do connect in other areas," my father commented. "But do you really?" she said, stirring the pot deliberately, putting her hands up against my father, pushing him hard against the trunk of a tree, where she teasingly began to slide her long, painted, manicured, elegant fingers down the contours of his face, down his neck, and across his chest. My father looked a little alarmed, rather like a caged animal, not knowing quite how to react. He wasn't expecting this. He was completely caught off guard. I'd been following them closely and was peering behind a tree, watching this intimate moment unfold before my eyes between my father and Francoise. I wasn't happy, not one bit. I wasn't sure how to intercede, to break up this cosy, booming, romantic interlude that had the potential to get totally out of hand. All of a sudden, I heard a chattering sound. I looked up, and there was this huge creature hiding behind a large black walnut tree. His long, flowing dark hair was exactly the same colour as the bark itself. Very, very dark. At first, the creature just stood up. I worked out that it must have been about 8 foot tall. It could have been a youngster. It was lean, lanky, not really filled out yet. Its shoulders were exceedingly broad. It struck me as muscular, sinewy, powerfully strong, with overlong arms, a cone-shaped head, a hairless, leathery grey face, with a pronounced brow ridge, high cheekbones, flat nose, thin mouth, and deep-set dark eyes. The Bigfoot was watching my father and Francoise interacting together. He seemed to find it terribly comical. He was shaking his arch-shaped head from side to side, backwards and forwards, going, "Ah, ah, ah, ah," as if he was laughing at them. I'm almost positive that that is exactly what he was doing. He studied their body language very intently, very curiously. He began to imitate their actions precisely. He was impersonating Francoise to a T, who was now putting her arms around my father's neck and pouting as she leaned forward to kiss him on the lips. The Bigfoot copied Francoise's action, using his own body. He placed his overlong arms around himself, hugging himself, tracing the contours of his own high cheekbones, using the edges of his huge hands, just like Francoise had done on my father. Then he rounded his thin grey lips into a pout. He began to smooch the air, smacking his lips together, as if he was kissing. This extraordinary creature was replicating, acting out, if you like, Francoise's flirtatious advances so seamlessly towards my father. He portrayed my father's shocked reactions. I watched him suddenly widen his eyes like my dad had done, and look totally startled and shocked. I was laughing so much that I stuffed the corner of my shirt in my mouth so that my father could not hear me. That was when I heard my father say, "You're a very attractive woman, Francoise. It's so good to meet someone so interested in contemporary art like you. But I am a married man with children. I couldn't cheat on my wife. She is my very best friend. I'm very flattered. If I wasn't married, well, things would be very different, I'm sure." I'm not going to deny the fact that I was so thrilled to hear my father reject Francoise's amorous advances. She didn't take it at all well. She stamped her foot like a belligerent child. She said, "You're pathetic. You don't know a good thing when it's staring you blindly in the face. Have you ever heard of just letting your hair down, having a little bit of fun? What your wife doesn't know won't hurt her." "Oh, but it will," said my father. "It would prickle my conscience too much to ever cheat on her." "I might have known you were a complete loser," she said, storming back to the house. The Bigfoot copied Francoise's stamping movements. I saw my father running after her. I think he was telling her not to overreact or to take offence. But I don't think she was listening. She was very upset. "So what happened after that?" I asked. "Well, I think the Bigfoot suddenly saw me watching him. He became quite reticent, actually. I don't think he realised he had such an appreciative audience. I remember his eyes twinkled with humour, But I also know he was painfully shy on seeing me. He just turned around, glided away. I did try running after him, but he vanished from my sight. He was gone. I never saw him again. Well, you've trumped all of us with your story, Sally Ann, I said. I can't believe you saw a Bigfoot. I feel positively overshadowed by you. To think that you've kept this from us for so long just boggles my mind. That all happened several years ago. Even though I'm married now with a toddler, I'm glad to inform you that I still meet up with my two very best friends on the same date every single year, as some things in life are worth preserving, and those are friendships. So there you are. That's my story. What a fabulous story. Thank you so much. Until next time, goodbye and good night.